Okay, EMDR. You send over research on a therapy that involves eye movements and trauma, and my first thought, honestly, was, is this science or sorcery?
Yeah.
But then I dug into the materials you shared,
It
and
is a fair question.
yeah,
And the answer is, thankfully, more science than magic. What's really intriguing about EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is how it connects to the way our brains naturally learn and handle memories, even the difficult ones.
right, because it's not like we can just selectively hit, like, delete on bad memories as much as we might want to sometimes.
Right.
You included some information about how EMDR ties into classical conditioning, like Pavlov's experiment. But instead of a bell making a dog drool, we're talking about rewiring trauma responses.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Trauma can create these incredibly powerful links in the brain. A certain sound, smell, or even just a thought becomes associated with the fear and pain of the trauma. EMDR aims to help you reprocess those memories so they no longer trigger the same intense emotional reaction.
So it's not about erasing the memory itself,
Right.
but changing how your mind and body
Yeah,
react to it.
precisely. It's about creating new neural pathways, if you will. And this is where the whole eye movement aspect comes in the bilateral stimulation. It's thought to help your brain process those difficult memories in a way similar to what happens during REM sleep, which is essential for healthy memory function.
Okay, so moving my eyes back and forth could actually make it easier to cope with the emotional weight of a traumatic memory.
Yep.
Even if I still remember the event, the intensity lessens. It seems almost too straightforward to be effective.
It's understandable to be skeptical, but the evidence for EMDR is surprisingly robust. We're not just talking about anecdotal reports here. Organizations like the American Psychiatric Association and the World Health Organization have recognized EMDR as an effective treatment for PTSD, and numerous studies back up its effectiveness. What's even more interesting is that the positive effects appear to be long-lasting, not just a temporary fix.
Okay, color me intrigued. You've definitely piqued my curiosity beyond just the initial eye-waving aspect. But you also provided some research on how EMDR might be used for more than just PTSD, like helping with addiction. How would that even work?
That's a great point. We tend to think of addiction as this purely behavioral thing, but you're saying there's a neurological component that EMDR could potentially address. Exactly. Addiction, much like trauma, creates very strong associations in the brain. Think of it like those neural pathways we were talking about, but instead of a traumatic memory, it's the substance or behavior that gets linked to uh, feelings of reward or relief. EMDR might be able to help rewire those reward pathways, making those cravings less intense and easier to manage.
So instead of just like white-knuckling your way through cravings,
Yeah.
EMDR could potentially help shift how your brain responds to those triggers in the first place.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And what's exciting is that it's not just theoretical. There's promising research emerging on EMDR's potential for treating various addictions, from substance abuse to gambling disorder and even food addiction.
You also included some research on EMDR being used for eating disorders, which seems counterintuitive at first glance.
Yeah.
How does a therapy that deals with memories and associations apply to something like anorexia or bulimia?
Eating disorders are complex, but often stem from a distorted self-image or a deeply ingrained negative relationship with food and body image. This is where EMDR can be surprisingly effective. While it's not about erasing memories of food itself, EMDR can help uncover and process any underlying trauma or negative experiences that might be fueling those unhealthy thought patterns and behaviors.
So it's not about the food per se,
Right.
but about addressing the emotional roots of those disordered eating habits.
Precisely. It's about helping someone reprocess the negative beliefs and feelings they've associated with food and their body. By targeting those underlying emotional wounds, EMDR can potentially pave the way for a healthier relationship with food and a more positive self-image.
It seems like a recurring theme with EMDR is getting to the root of the issue, not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms. And you sent over information on even more applications, like using EMDR for chronic pain, sleep disorders, even grief and loss. Is there a limit to what this therapy can address?
It's important to remember that EMDR isn't a magic cure-all. It's not a replacement for other forms of therapy or medical treatment. But what's fascinating is how EMDR's approach of addressing how our brains process experiences can be applied to such a wide range of challenges.
It certainly makes you think about the mind-body connection in a whole new light. But with all this talk about the potential benefits, are there any downsides to EMDR? Any risks we should be aware of before diving in?
That's a crucial question. And the short answer is yes. There are potential risks, as with any therapy. EMDR is generally considered safe, especially when facilitated by a trained and qualified therapist. However, it's not uncommon for people to experience some side effects, particularly in the beginning.
What kind of side effects are we talking about?
Well, some people might have vivid dreams or experience a temporary increase in intense emotions as those memories surface and are processed. Remember, EMDR involves revisiting potentially traumatic experiences, so it can be emotionally intense, even when it's ultimately beneficial. It's not a passive process. It requires active engagement and a willingness to confront those difficult emotions.
So it's not for the faint of heart. It sounds like preparation and proper support are key.
Absolutely. It's crucial to work with a therapist who is experienced in EMDR and who can guide you through the process safely and effectively. They can help you prepare for each session, manage any intense emotions that come up, and integrate the insights you gain from EMDR into your daily life.
That makes sense. It's not something you'd want to try at home on your own.
Exactly. While there are some self-help techniques inspired by EMDR, like butterfly tapping, attempting the full 8-phase protocol without proper training and support is strongly discouraged.
You mentioned an 8-phase protocol. Is that specific to EMDR?
Yes. EMDR therapy follows a structured 8-phase protocol that's designed to facilitate the reprocessing of traumatic memories and instill a sense of empowerment in the individual.
That sounds much more involved than just waving your fingers in front of someone's face.
It definitely goes much deeper than that. Each phase plays a crucial role. From taking a thorough history and identifying specific memories or triggers to work on, to actually processing those memories using bilateral stimulation, and then integrating those new insights and beliefs into your life. It's a comprehensive approach that addresses the emotional, cognitive, and physical aspects of trauma.
This is all incredibly helpful. We've covered what EMDR is, how it works, and its potential benefits and risks. But I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that there's a specific type of EMDR called attachment-focused EMDR. Could you elaborate on that a bit? How does that differ from traditional EMDR? So it's like EMDR with an added layer focus on those early relationships that shape so much of who we become.
Exactly. Attachment-focused EMDR, or AF-EMDR, recognizes that our early bonds with caregivers can have a profound impact on our emotional development and our ability to form healthy relationships later in life. If those early attachments were disrupted or traumatic, it can create a kind of ripple effect that impacts us for years to come.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does AF-EMDR actually work in practice? Does it use those same 8 phases you mentioned earlier?
It does build upon that same 8-phase framework, but with some key distinctions. One of the most notable is the incorporation of something called resource tapping.
Resource tapping. Okay, now you've really piqued my curiosity. What is that exactly?
Essentially, it involves identifying internal and external resources that evoke feelings of safety, comfort, or strength for the individual. These resources could be positive memories, supportive people in their lives, or even imagined places of peace and tranquility.
So it's almost like creating a mental toolbox of positivity and strength that you can draw upon during the EMDR process.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. While focusing on these positive resources, the individual engages in bilateral stimulation, just like in traditional EMDR. This could involve eye movements, tapping, or alternating sounds.
So it's combining the power of positive visualization with those bilateral stimulation techniques to rewire those negative thought patterns and emotional responses.
Precisely. And the research suggests that this combination can be incredibly powerful for healing attachment wounds and fostering a more secure sense of self. It's about helping individuals tap into their own inner resilience and strength.
This is all so fascinating. I have to admit, before this deep dive, I had a very superficial understanding of EMDR. I had no idea about its complexity, the different applications, or the underlying neuroscience.
It's a surprisingly nuanced therapy, and we're still learning so much about its potential. Speaking of which, you had some questions about the origins of EMDR. Who actually came up with this idea in the first place? As you noted earlier, it was developed by a psychologist named Francine Shapiro back in the late 1980s.
Right, Dr. Francine Shapiro. Her name definitely came up in my research. Didn't you discover EMDR kind of by accident?
It's a great story. As the tale goes, Dr. Shapiro was walking through a park one day when she noticed that her own distressing thoughts seemed to lessen when she moved her eyes back and forth, observing the scenery around her.
So from a casual walk in the park to a groundbreaking therapeutic approach, that's amazing.
It really highlights how these serendipitous moments can lead to incredible breakthroughs if we're open to exploring them. Of course, it wasn't just a matter of moving her eyes and poof, EMDR was born. Dr. Shapiro was already a seasoned clinician and researcher, and that initial observation sparked years of rigorous study and refinement to develop EMDR into the evidence-based therapy it is today.
From those initial observations to gaining recognition from organizations like the World Health Organization, it's quite a journey. As we're wrapping up here, it strikes me that this whole deep dive into EMDR underscores just how much we're still learning about the incredible healing power of our own brains.
Absolutely. It really speaks to the power of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives. And what's so exciting about EMDR is that it offers a tangible way to tap into that potential for healing and growth. It's not just about talking about our problems, it's about actively changing our relationship to those experiences on a neurological level.
It makes you wonder about what other breakthroughs are out there waiting to be uncovered, what other untapped potential lies within our own minds. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our exploration into the fascinating world of EMDR and the incredible possibilities it holds.